All right, we are still in Proverbs. We are in Proverbs chapter 30. There's one more chapter after this, okay? And Kevin's going to finish that off. So, he will. This has been a great study, I have to say. I have been through this and through it, and I still don't know it all. It's definitely a good study, and caused me to really question and go through and figure out what's going on here. Some of it's very straightforward, and some of it in the beginning is where I really struggled in this first section. Anyway, when we talk about this book, this section, this chapter, we have this guy named Agur, I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce it, but he wrote this, and instead of Solomon, and it's different than the rest of Proverbs. Proverbs 30 and 31 are written totally different. They're not don't be wise, don't be a fool. It's that whole going back and forth. This has got sections, and it's really his amazement of all the different things and his observations. Themes in this section, we're going to see humility and dependence on God, divine wisdom and understanding, praise for the wonders of creation, the evils of dishonesty and discontent, and observations of the natural world. So that's all in this chapter. And there's topics. The topics are the limitations of human understanding, the 4 wonders of the earth, the 4 types of unpleasant people, the 4 small but wise creatures, and warnings against falsehood and greed. So that's all in this chapter. And it took me some time to unravel it, and I'm still unraveling it. So it's a good study. I was really glad that I got the opportunity to do this. At first, I was a little frustrated. I said, Kevin, what'd you do to me? But as I got through this, and I'll explain why I was a little frustrated in the beginning here. So let me just start off. It starts off the first, my notes here, verses 1 through 4. And I'm just going to read them, and then I'm going to go through them. It says, the words of Agur, the son of Jacob, his utterance, this man declared to Ithiel and Ucal. I think that's a C. Surely I am more stupid than any man, and do not have the understanding of a man. I neither learned wisdom, nor have knowledge of a holy one. Who has ascended into heaven and descended? Who has gathered the wind in his fists? Who has bound the waters in a garment? Who has established all the ends of the earth? What is his name, and what is his son's name, if you know? Now I'm reading out of the New King James Version, so if you have a different version, there's a lot. This is where I started to struggle, because there are so many different wordings in this introduction. It starts off with Agur. Let me just read it. Agur was a Hebrew contributor to the book of Proverbs. We know nothing of his father Jacob, but the name of his utterance may be a place name. In other translations, though, the word utterance is replaced with oracle. So, a prophecy. So we have this. This is, again, what is it? I'm going to read a couple of different versions so you can see, as I did like a parallel Bible study. In the New International Version, it says, the sayings of Agur, son of Jacob, an inspired utterance, this man's utterance to Ithiel, I am weary, God, but I can prevail. It doesn't mention Ucal anywhere. In the New Living Translation, it says, the sayings of Agur, son of Jacob, contain this message, I am weary, O God, I am weary and worn out, O God. English Standard Version says, the words of Agur, son of Jacob, the oracle, the man declares, I am weary, O God, I am weary, O God, and worn out. Berean, I'm going to read 2 more. Berean, these are the words of Agur, son of Jacob, the burden that this man declared to Ithiel, I am weary, O God, and worn out. And in the King James Version, this is the New King James that I read out of. In the King James Version, it says, the words of Agar, the son of Jacob, even the prophecy, the man spake unto Ethiel, even into Ethiel and Ucal. So this is where I started going, okay, who is Ethiel and Ucal? Or what is this other words, and why is it different? I'm like, this is frustrating because I shouldn't see so much differences. And I probably spent, I don't know how many hours, I will say more than 3, just trying to understand this piece. And some of you may have said, well, I could have understood it in a couple of minutes, but for me it took longer. So Agar was either talking to his pupils, Ithiel and Ucal, or he was saying, I have wearied myself, O God, I have wearied myself, O God, and I am consumed, or something to that effect. The reason there's a difference, as I started to research, is the Hebrew and the way it's translated and where it goes, and the way, the lettering and the interpretation. So I'm kind of convinced more, this is my commentary, not anywhere published anywhere, but it may be more of the words, I have wearied myself, O God, I have wearied myself, O God, and I am consumed, only because this seems more like a prayer, like he's praying to God in some sort of a prayer. Otherwise, he's speaking to his students. He's a prophet, or he's speaking to his students in some way. Either way, in the end, as I've studied, I realized it doesn't really matter. It wasn't that important at this point, as you'll see as we go on. He goes on to say that, surely I am more stupid. I'm going to go back to verse 2. Surely I am more stupid than any man, and do not have the understanding of a man. I neither learned wisdom nor have knowledge of the Holy One. He's really just being humble. And I feel like him a lot. You know, I can relate to this guy that as a human being here on this earth, I know the more I know and learn, the more I realize I don't know. In fact, this study just proved it to me. Because the more I studied, the more I realized I do not know. And as much as I would like to know. But then he goes on, he says, who has ascended into heaven and descended? Who has gathered the wind in his fists? Who has bound the waters in the garment? Who has established all the ends of the earth? What is his name? And what is his son's name, if you know? Now, this, let me make sure I get the right place. I don't want to skip ahead here. In the opening verses, Agar admits his ignorance and his desperate need for God's divine wisdom. He acknowledges the limitations of human understanding and emphasizes the unknowable nature of God. What is his name? It's essentially he's acknowledging who God is. And what is his son name is really prophecy of Jesus. Because the Old Testament didn't have a name for Jesus, or didn't have the name Jesus. And in the Old Testament, it contains prophecies about Jesus, including Isaiah 53, Psalm 22, and Psalm 31. All have prophecy of Jesus is coming, but they never mention his name. They just say the one who is coming, or they'll have other terms for that. So that's interesting that he's already knows who the Son of God is. Or he doesn't know him by name, but he definitely knows there is a Son of God coming. And I found that fascinating. So this guy, though he's not a Solomon, he's got wisdom. And he's got some knowledge about what's going on. And he's really struggling with his life. And really just, again, humbling himself. And the questions he's asking, who has ascended into heaven or descended, he knows that only Jesus has done that. Who has gathered the wind in his fists? Only God can do that. You know, these are the natures of God that he can only do that. We can't do that. So he acknowledges all that. And then he goes on in verses 5 and 6. He says, every word of God is pure. He is a shield to those who put their trust in him. Do not add to his words, lest he rebuke you, and you be found a liar. Now I read this and I went, wait a minute, I've got all these other Bible verses that are so different. What is going on? Is But then I had to reread it and really look at it, because every word of God is pure. He is a shield to those who put their trust in him. Do not add to his words, lest he rebuke you and be found a liar. In Deuteronomy, this is where I found my answer to this. It says, you shall not add to the word which I command you, nor take from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God. This verse emphasizes the importance of not altering the divine instructions given by God. The introduction is not an instruction of God. It is just merely of who the man is or who he's talking to. It's not really telling us how to live our life or how to do things the way of God. So to have a little bit of variation there, that helped me to make peace with this, okay? So I was a little struggling with that. I was like, how are these verses all different, but yet it tells me right here, don't add or take away. I'm like, thank you, Kevin. So as we went through this, and it goes on into verses 7, I think it's 7 through 9. He says, 2 things I request of you, and in parentheses I have, deprive me not before I die. It says, verse 8, remove falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food allotted to me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. He acknowledges the perfection of God's words and his refuge in them. He implores God to keep him from falsehood and poverty or wealth, each with its own pitfalls. You know, if you have too much money, you can forget God, right? You can say, I'm taken care of, I'm okay, I don't need to depend on God. If you have too little, you might be cursing God because you're struggling so bad that your basic needs aren't being met. And he's asking God, just give me what I need, and let me be content with what you provide for me. And that should be all our prayer, really. That's who we are and what we do. And as Christians, you know, I'll confess that, you know, there's a lot of times I said, challenge me with a lot of money and let me see, let me have that problem, you know, and see how it goes, God. But he knows better, and he always says, no, I don't think so. Here's your little bit of money. It's enough to pay your bills. You can buy groceries. You're taken care of, and I'm content, you know, and God has provided for me. And there have been so many times where God has provided for me when I thought, where are we going to get this money to pay this bill? What are we going to do? How is this going to happen? We're praying to God, Lord. And then all of a sudden a refund check comes in or something happens, and all of a sudden there's money. God provides. And I'm not saying that happened, you know, that just because you asked for it, he gives it to you. But seeking God's wisdom, seeking God's will, he provides. And I think that's where we a lot of times when we talk about tithing, you know, to give, knowing that God honors that. You know, if your heart is right and you're giving right, then God is honoring it, and he's repaying you and giving you what you need. Anyway, I thought that was, it really spoke to me, because a lot of times, like I said, we always want more, we always want more, we always want more. And really to be content in God and what he has for us, that's really the peace that you get and the comfort, knowing that you are right with God and God is taking care of you. There's no better place to be. In verses 10, I think it's 10 through 14. Yes. Do I have that on the verses 10 through 14? It says, do not malign a servant to his master, lest he curse you and you be found guilty. There is a generation that curses its father and does not bless its mother. There is a generation that is pure in its own eyes, yet it is not washed from its filthiness. There's a generation, oh, how lofty are their eyes, and their eyelids are lifted up. There's a generation whose teeth are like swords, and whose fangs are the knives, to devour the poor from off the earth, and the needy from among men. And he warns us against slandering a servant to their master and describes 4 types of unpleasant people, illustrating negative characteristics to avoid. Talking bad about somebody is not a good thing. Being able to think you're better than somebody else, it doesn't work that way. Those are negative characteristics to avoid. Agur wrote of a generation plagued by ills, such as a lack of respect for parents, self-righteousness, greed, and selfishness. And it's still happening today, right? That hasn't changed. That's an ongoing thing that we face constantly, where, I don't know, we just don't learn that. That's something that we haven't gotten right. Respect for parents, self-righteousness, greed and selfishness, they're all there. They happen daily, and we've seen it. He goes on in verses 15 and 16. He says, the leech has 2 daughters. Give and give. Give and give. And there are 3 things that are never satisfied. 4 never say enough. The grave, the barren womb, the earth that is not satisfied with water, and the fire never says enough. In the verses where the leech, it has this insatiable appetite and are used as an analogy to depict greed and discontent. The leech just give. Not giving, but really taking, telling you to give, right? And then he goes on to the 4 things that are never satisfied. We know the grave is never satisfied. The grave will constantly be filled. The barren womb, it was talking about a woman that longs to have a child but can't. If we're talking about the earth, it's not satisfied with water. We have this constant flow of water that we need. The earth constantly needs water. And fire just burns and burns. It consumes everything that it can. It's never satisfied. So those are things that he wondered and he noticed about and continues to write about. Now, he goes on. In verse 17, I had this note. I want to make sure I get to it. Oh, yeah, here it is. In verse 17, he says, the eye that mocks his father and scorns obedience to his mother, the ravens of the valley will pick it out, and the young eagles will eat it. And I thought, okay, I had to look at this and say, what is he doing here? And proper burial was an important part of the ancient culture. It's still important today. Especially degrading was leaving a body to be slowly eaten by scavengers. This is the fate predicted by Agur for those who show no respect for their parents. In this context, his reference is not narrowly reserved for that sin, nor is the gruesome image meant to be taken as a literal prophecy. Rather, the mocking, scoffing attitude is associated with those who are rebellious and stubborn. Those who constantly reject the authority set themselves up for dire consequences. So it's kind of an analogy of what to come, but I thought the graphics there were rather like, it just surprised me it was in there. And I mean, there's a lot of great things in the Bible, but that's one of those visuals that you just like, wow. In 19 through 20, let me see if I get this right, 18 through 20, help if I had better glasses. He goes on, and he says, there are 3 things which are too wonderful for me, yes, 4 which I do not understand. The way of an eagle in the air, the way of a serpent on the rock, the way of a ship in the midst of a sea, and the way of a man with a virgin. This is the way of an This is the way of an adulterous woman. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, I have done no wickedness. So again, I'm reading this. Okay, he throws these things in there that just, it's like, I get the snake, I get this eagle. If the eagle's in the air and it's flying, I don't see a trail of where the eagle's been in the air. I can't see that. I can't see a serpent or snake across rocks, I can't see where it's been. I can see it in the dirt if it leaves a trail, but on rocks, it leaves no trail. I understand that. He talks about the ship in the midst of a sea. Again, the ship will leave a small trail and it vanishes, and I can't see where it's been. I get that. There are three things which are wonderful. Those are wonderful to him. But this fourth thing, he says he doesn't understand, and that's the way of an adulterous woman. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, I've done no wickedness. It was like, so he contrasts all with the adulterous woman who has no remorse for her actions. So he's taking all these wonderful things and saying, then there's this woman who sins and doesn't think she's sinned. And I mean, that can apply to all of us. There's a lot of people who sin and think they haven't sinned. They just, it's okay. It's all right. No problem. And it is a problem. And they just don't see their sin. And they don't recognize it. And she doesn't recognize her sin. And she just goes on her way like it's nothing. And again, I've seen people like this who sin and say it's not a problem. I'm right with God. It's okay. It's like, it's not okay. It's not okay. That isn't just being saved and born again does not give you the right to go out and sin. It means you're forgiven of your sins, but it doesn't give you the right to go out and knowingly sin. Okay? And you have to acknowledge that. And in cases, there are people that go out and sin and don't realize they're sinning. And as they read the word and they're new believers, and they start to learn that God works in their life, doesn't he? And he starts to change them and mold them and to shape them. And I've seen that happen with a lot of people where they've changed after they recognize their sin and they acknowledge it and are able to change and move on and grow closer to God for it. But in this case, this lady has no clue. In verses 21 through 23, again, this thing is broken up into all these little sections. And he uses numbers. He says in verse 21, for three things the earth is perturbed. Yes, the four it cannot bear up. For a servant when he reigns, a fool when he is filled with food, a hateful woman when she is married, and a maidservant who succeeds her mistress. Now, Hagar? Yeah, exactly. And that's, yeah, exactly. So he speaks of, let me make sure I got the right verses. He speaks of four societal situations that are difficult to bear, illustrating societal balance and harmony. So in Proverbs 30:21, he says his broader point was about inserting someone into a situation for which they are not prepared. Like the first one involved a slave becoming king. Someone with no knowledge or experience of ruling suddenly gaining power. I could think of someone that was running. And then the second was wisdom deprived, a fool. Experiencing material comfort, furthering, I'm going to change my page, their insensitivity to God's will. That's a fool. The third thing is identified as an extremely unsettling, is an unloved woman who gets married. The implication is the woman who feels rejected or scorned, causing her bitterness, and Hagar. When she eventually finds a husband, she may carry that cynicism with her, or she may be prone to lashing out to those who ignored her in the past, or the arrogance may be a disruption to the family dynamics, which are extremely important to the communal society. Like Israel, Leah, the first wife of Jacob, seemed to have been such an unloved woman, and her father tricked Jacob into marrying her. That's one of the other examples I found. But yeah, I thought of Hagar was one of the first ones that came to mind. There's examples of it all over where someone had to marry someone and it was not out of love. Almost done here. Woohoo! All right. let's see, 24. There we are, 24 through 28. This is cool. He says, there are 4 things which are little on earth, but they are exceedingly wise. The ants are a people not strong, yet they prepare their food in the summer. The rock badgers are feeble folk, yet they make their homes in the crags of rocks. The locusts have no king, yet they all advance in ranks. The spider skillfully grasps with its hands, and it is in kings' palaces. So these creatures, at first I'm like, okay, creatures, why? That's interesting. Why are you putting those in there? But he points out 4 small creatures of the earth that are deemed wise for their survival strategies, emphasizing wisdom in the least expected places. So ants, they gather food and they prepare. They're wise. They know that it's going to rain or the weather's changing, so they're gathering food and preparing. The badger, and it may say there's several different little animals that mean the same thing, uses the rocks for protection. So they're out there on the rocks, and they could easily be prey to something, but they can go into the rocks and the cracks, and they can hide, and they can use it as a fortress. And they're smart, because that's where they build their house. The locusts work together even though they do not have a leader. That's amazing. They work all in like an army of locusts, but they don't have a leader. But somehow they all work together to devour all the crops and whatever they're going after. And then the spider, though it's small, lives in kings' palaces. I don't have anything for that, but I looked for something that I couldn't find anything that why a spider, but that it's so small, but yet it lives in these giant palaces. You got something? Yours says lizards? Okay, small creature. And that's the other thing is it may have, like, did yours say badger or did it say something else? Badger? Okay. I don't know. And what did yours say? Well, yeah, that was the other, coney. That was the one that I heard of. Yeah. And when I looked them up, they're just little, small, they look like, I don't know, a chipmunk, but they look just small little creatures that can live in a rock. And I can't even think of the words now. But they were kind of interesting looking. Then he goes on. There, in verse 20, did I do 24? Yep. And then in 29 through 31, if I skip something, let me know. There are 3 things which are majestic in pace. Yes, 4 which are stately in walk. A lion which is mighty among beasts and does not turn away from any. A greyhound, a male goat also, and a king whose troops are with him. He identifies creatures that move with dignity and strength, and a metaphor for leading a life with grace and strength. So, I mean, I picture a king riding and his army riding behind him. It's just very majestic and powerful looking. A lion walking, just not afraid of anything, just walking and everything else is just kind of bowing to it. But I didn't get the male goat. Did you say something else beside a male goat? What? A he-goat. Okay. A rooster and a male goat. Okay. All right. Yeah? Yeah, they are. They're very mean. All right. So let's finish this here. Now, verse 32 through 33 says, if you have been foolish in exalting yourself, or if you have devised evil, put your hand on your mouth. As the churning of milk produces butter, and the wringing the nose produces blood, so the forcing of wrath produces strife. And he's just warning us against stirring up anger and causing trouble which will only lead to strife. Now, again, this, because of all the different sections and what he was talking about, was an interesting study. Like I said, in the beginning, those few verses that are so different, and again, we're seeing that we have some different words for different animals and even in there. It just fascinates me. Like, how did they get that? Where did that come from? And it's all in how the Hebrew is translated, in the Greek, and all of that. So, again, we've seen humility and dependence on God. That was in the beginning of the prayer. Wisdom and understanding. Praise for the wonders of creation. He looked at all of the different things, the little animals and all of that. The evils of dishonesty and discontentment. Observations of the natural world. He just observed, and this is what he wrote down, and he learned from it. And I think we could apply a lot of this to our lives, trying to be more like Agur. And that's it. So I tell you, it's either going to be fast or slow. So, all right. Well, thank you. We can talk more about this after we close that live stream. Let's pray. You want what? We could. A lot of, when I studied this, and I went online and I looked at, let me hear other sermons on these chapters. Nobody does a good job. There's people that do Proverbs 30 and 31 in 35 minutes. There's one pastor did chapter 30 in about 55 minutes, but he never really talked about, he went off on stories and never really talked about the word. So I spent a lot of time going through, like, when's he going to get to the meat? He never did. And there's a lot of this where, or they'll take 4 verses and speak for 55 minutes on one little section of this and turn it into an entire sermon. So I thought, well, I'll just listen to some of these and learn from them, take some notes and go from there. No, that didn't work.